Como é visitar um cemitério assombrado e andar no autocarro mais assustador de Edimburgo? Neste vídeo vais ouvir as histórias que fazem desta uma das cidades mais aterrorizantes do mundo. Será que tens coragem para ouvi-las?
Malta, chegou a altura de fazermos a tour no autocarro assombrado. Vamos naquele autocarro, todo preto, mesmo da...
We shall be visiting places of death, murder, traffic jams, and spooky things. The consummation of alcohol is forbidden. Chitty chatting is not encouraged. Please remain seated while the bus is in motion. Also, please do not touch the bell, or the lights, or the seats, or the floor, or the ceiling, or each other. You may touch yourselves if you wish, but bear in mind this is a family tour. This is a very strange old bus. We've been forced to install CCTV. Hiya. I am Tommy Terra, your foolish guide for this evening. So, ladies and gentlemen, are you ready for your ghost tour to begin?
Yes!
Very well, let us travel back in time to a time of disease, poverty, brutality, and prostitution. And that was just last week. Welcome to Edinburgh. So the suspected witch would have her hands tied to her feet, and she'd be thrown into the filthy water. If she floated, she was a witch. She was executed. If she sank and drowned, she wasn't a witch. She was set free and buried. A very fair system, I'm sure you'll all agree. Between 1479 and 1722, we killed 2,500 people as witches here in Scotland. It's bonkers, isn't it? We actually killed more witches than any other country in Europe. And we used to burn our witches up here. Down south, they like to hang them. We would strangle them and then burn them. We are now heading into the new town, ladies and gentlemen. Now, this part of Edinburgh is over 200 years old, but we still call it the new town. And it's time for the first ghost of this evening's tour. We are looking for the ghost of the Blue Lady. This was the ghost of a woman called Jane Vernels. In 1892, she used to own a dress shop in this part of Edinburgh's new town, but she fell ill and she was forced to sell her shop. She then died completely insane, and her ghost was seen wandering the streets in this part of Edinburgh. The ghost wears an old-fashioned blue dress, and she's most often seen on George Street. We are now turning on to George Street, ladies and gentlemen. This is where Jane Vernels had her dress shop all those years ago, and this is where the ghost has been seen. So keep your eyes out for a blue lady here looking into shop windows. But this was also the home of a famous murderer. A Frenchman called Eugene Chantrel lived on this street in 1878, and he murdered his wife Elizabeth here. On the TV screens you can see a photograph of Eugene Chantrel and his wife Elizabeth. So he poisoned her with opium to get the insurance money, and he tried to make it look as if she'd been killed by a gas leak in the bedroom of their house. But they did an autopsy, although they did find opium in her vomit on the bedsheet. So they hanged him at Carlton Jail. He was known as the Demon Frenchman of George Street. So this is the new town. Anyway, I better introduce you to the driver, Angus. He's just out of prison. He's a very strange character, and he's just obtained his provisional license. Here, Angus, introduce yourself, please.
Ay, ollas, voy a fallecer,
Oh, is that right? Well, isn't that fascinating? Thank you very much, Angus, yeah. Oh, that's disgusting. Well, don't scratch it, you'll make it worse. I'm going to switch him off, we'll speak to him later on. So that's your driver, Mad Uncle Angus. I am your conductor, Tommy Terra. And have a look at your TV screens for Springfield Jack. Now, in Victorian Edinburgh, this strange-looking character would jump out of bushes and terrify people. He'd be dressed up with a mask with horn claws on his fingers. He would never touch anyone. He would just frighten them and then run away. They called him Springfield Jack because he was able to jump very high over walls and fences and escape the police. And they never caught this person. He was also seen in London, Liverpool and Aberdeen. On the left-hand side here, the ghost of a weeping woman called Moira Blair has been seen. Now, Moira Blair was knocked down and killed by a horse and carriage here, and her ghost is seen weeping on the left-hand side. Have you spotted the graveyard on the left? The graveyards of Edinburgh were famous for their body snatchers. Now, these were criminals who would steal dead bodies and sell them to student doctors. Now, Edinburgh in the early 1800s was a hub of medical training. We gave people the finest medical training in the English-speaking world, but the doctors needed bodies to practice on. You couldn't qualify to be a doctor unless you had dissected a body. So the student doctors would pay £10 for a fresh corpse. That was about a year's wages for the common working man. So you get a lot of criminals going into these graveyards at night, digging up the bodies and selling them to the doctors. On the left, we've got St Cuthbert's graveyard. This is the oldest graveyard in Edinburgh. This has been a religious site since the 7th century. In 1742, there was a huge riot in the streets because a body was stolen from this graveyard. They were so angry about the desecration of the graves in this graveyard.
You're all gonna have to get off this bus.
What are you talking about, Angus?
We have a slight problem. Everyone off.
This is ridiculous. Where do you expect us to go?
Why don't you have a wee wander through the graveyard?
But Angus, you know that graveyard's haunted. Ladies and gentlemen, I've got a wee surprise for you lot this evening. No, it's not a trip to McDonald's for a happy meal. It's a trip inside a haunted graveyard. And if anyone doesn't want to go into a dark graveyard with a strange man wearing too much makeup, that's entirely understandable. Be careful going down the steps. If anyone does fall, make sure I'm watching. I could do with a laugh tonight. Okay.
E neste momento deves estar a perguntar-te: Gonçalo, como é que tu fizeste para pagar este autocarro de Edimburgo em libras, sendo que tu recebes em euros? Bem, é aí que entra o Revolut.
Saímos todos do autocarro para virmos visitar o cemitério. O autocarro ficou ali em cima.
O Revolut é um banco utilizado por mais de 40 milhões de pessoas que te permite obter as menores taxas do mercado e pagar mais barato. Por isso, se estiveres interessado, link na descrição. Se quiseres pagar mais caro, ignora esta dica. Agora siga para o cemitério assombrado.
Of someone's grave. When this place first opened, it was only a small patch of land down by the side of the church, and they called it Children's Hill because they started off by burying children in this graveyard. Now they do say the ghost of a little girl walks this place after dusk. He will pull or tap on the back of your coat. So if you feel a pulling, do not turn around. You could come to a horrible sticky end. So let's go and see if we can find her. She sounds like fun.
Estamos a passar aqui ao pé do cemitério em direção à igreja. Espero que o microfone tenha captado bem o som e vocês consigam perceber o que ele disse.
Agatha Christie, the murder mystery writer, was married in this church. And can you see the castle through the trees there? Bathed in orange light. The most attacked castle in British history and one of the most haunted. Does anyone here tonight suffer from taphophobia? Do you know what that is? It's the fear of being buried alive. And back in the 18th and 19th centuries, a lot of people had taphophobia because there was many documented instances of people being buried alive. Medical knowledge wasn't very good. Some people were in comas, looked dead, not buried. So, people started doing strange things to dead bodies just to check. They would chop off a finger or a toe to see if that would shock the person back into life. They would pour scalding red-hot water over a dead body to see if the skin would blister up. But the most bonkers thing was tobacco smoke enemas. They would stick a tube up the backside of a dead body and pump up hot tobacco smoke. They thought this would warm the body up from the inside, and they thought the smoke would get the breathing going. They also invented safety coffins. Now these were coffins fitted out with alarm systems like ropes and bells. So they would tie a rope to the wrist of the dead body inside the coffin, and the rope would be attached to a little bell. If you found yourself waking up in a coffin, buried alive and trapped, and you didn't like it, all you had to do was pull on your rope, ring your bell, and someone would come running in and dig you up. And if you were saved by the bell. But they didn't catch on, because as a body decomposes, it falls to bits and moves about. So they found the bells were ringing anyway. So the safety coffins didn't work out, but don't worry about it. Medical knowledge is so advanced these days, nobody here tonight has to worry about taphophobia, but at least we've learnt a new word. Now, what about the ghosts in the graveyard? Has anyone been told or touched so far? Some of you look disappointed. I'll see what I can do later on. The little girl who haunts this place is said to be buried just up there behind you. She most often attacks children, or women, or men. Be aware, we get a lot of strange photographs in this graveyard. Images of strange orbs of lights, mists, shadowy shapes and figures. In 1841, they dug up hundreds of bodies from this place to build a train tunnel underneath it. If you know anything about ghosts, you'll know it's not a good idea to disturb the rest of the dead. I think that's why we get a lot of strange photographs in here. So I'm going to invite you to get your cameras ready. We're going to head back up the path. I'll give you a crash course in body snatching, and I'll show you a hot spot where we get a lot of strange photographs. I'm going to show you how to be a good body snatcher now. Most of the body snatchers would get drunk before they did it because they would see and smell some very nasty stuff. So get yourself a good drink inside you before you try this. You also had to work very fast because there was an armed guard on this road here looking out for you. So the body snatchers would not dig up the whole coffin. That took far too long. They would dig straight down at the head end. They'd snap off the coffin lid. They would get hooks on ropes under the armpits, and they'd drag the whole body up through a small hole. It took less time. It left less evidence. So now you've got your body. The next thing you had to do is strip your body completely naked. All the clothing and jewellery has to go back inside the grave. You must leave that there. Why? Because stealing a dead body was not against the law. A body was not property, but the clothing and the jewellery, that was robbery. That could get you hanged. So leave that behind you if you try this later on tonight. So now you're standing in the graveyard with a naked dead body. What do you do next? Well, quite often they would knock the teeth out because they could sell the teeth to the dentist to make false teeth. And it was good insurance. If you got caught with the body and had to drop it and run, at least you still had some teeth to make your money from. So make sure you get the teeth as well. But the final thing you had to do is get the body out of here without being caught. And I have read that some body snatchers would snap the spines of the bodies so they could fold them up into a sack and carry them away. So they'd lie the body on the ground, jump up and down on the back, crack the spine, fold it up, and away they go. You need a strong stomach to do this for a living, wouldn't you? There was so much of this going on, we built this tower in 1827. This is a watchtower defending the graveyard against the body snatchers. Now, I've been doing this tour for 10 years this year, and I cannot tell you, honestly, how many weird photographs we see of that tower. Photographs with strange lights, shadowy shapes, figures, eyes at the window, faces. The watchtower I was talking about became redundant in 1832 with the introduction of a new law called the Anatomy Act. And this law allowed people to donate their bodies to medicine for the first time. So this gave the doctors a steady supply of bodies. So after 1832, the body snatchers just fizzled out. Up on the left-hand side, high up on the hill, Edinburgh Castle. If you're downstairs on the right, you might have to duck down a bit to see the castle. It's quite high up there. And the castle is also haunted by a grey lady called Janet Douglas. Now, Janet Douglas was a noblewoman who was falsely accused of trying to poison the king and was burned alive in front of the castle in 1537. And you know, they made her 16-year-old son stand and watch. It's hard to understand some of this stuff, isn't it? But the grey lady she is, Janet Douglas, poor woman, did nothing wrong. She haunts the castle. But let's move into the old town. And I'm going to mention the names of two men who lived in this part of Edinburgh. Vile, ghoulish characters who earned their living in the most despicable way. I am talking about Burke and Hare on your TV screens now. Two Irishmen living in this area in the 1820s. Two of the world's first documented serial killers, these two men. They murdered 16 people here and sold the bodies to the doctors. Now, on the right-hand side, there's an establishment named after them coming up here. It's some kind of dancing club or something. Burke and Hare murdered 16 people in this area. And what they would do is they'd go into the pubs and they'd look for a stranger in town, somebody who wouldn't be missed. They'd make friends with this person, get them drunk, take them back to their lodging house and suffocate them to death. Now, on the left-hand side is a big grey office building. This is where Burke and Hare's lodging house used to be, where they committed most of their murders. After they suffocated the victim, they would squeeze the body into a tea chest, carry it down the street, and sell it to Dr. Robert Knox for £10. £10 in the winter, £8 in the summer, because the bodies didn't last as long in the summer, you see. So 16 people. They were eventually caught on Halloween night of 1828 with the body of an old woman called Margaret Docherty. They were put on trial, and William Hare told the courts everything, so Hare got away with it. And William Burke was hanged for the murders. He was then publicly dissected. His skin was tanned and used to make book covers and wallets, and his skeleton is still on display in Edinburgh to this day. This evening, for one night only, I'm going to add a wee extra story here because today is a special day in a sort of strange way. 272 years ago today, two women were hanged in this square on the left-hand side. They were body snatchers who murdered a young boy 80 years before Burke and Hare. They were the first body snatchers anywhere in the world to be executed for murdering a victim. They were called Helen Torrance and Jean Wildboy. His name was John Dallas, and they sold his body to the doctors for 5 shillings. So that happened on the 18th of March, 1752. These two women were hanged here, body snatchers committing the first murder. So a wee anniversary there for the horrible people of the past. But this is the Grassmarket Square on the left-hand side. This is where they used to have the public hangings. 20,000 people would gather here to watch the executions. If you lived here, you could rent out your window on hanging day, make a wee bit extra money. But I want to talk about another woman who was hanged in this square, a woman called Maggie Dixon. Now, in 1728, she was found guilty of murder, and they hanged Maggie Dixon in this square, and then a fight broke out. Now, remember I told you that the student doctors were entitled to the bodies of the hanged criminals for the dissections. Well, the doctors turned up to get Maggie Dixon's body, but her family fought them because they wanted to bury her. And they reckon that while they were fighting over the body, it allowed air to circulate through the coffin before they nailed the lid down. Because Maggie Dixon sat up in her coffin, she grabbed her neck, she says, "I've got a hell of a sore neck, somebody get me a drink." She'd survived the hanging. So they let Maggie Dixon live. She became a big celebrity in this area. She lived for another 40 years after that, and they named a pub after her. So we're going to find Maggie Dixon's pub. It's coming up on the left-hand side along. So she was hanged here in September of 1728. There it is on the left-hand side. The gallows used to stand at this end of the square here. Now you'll see a street on the left-hand side going up the hill there. That street on the left is the Old West Bow, and that's haunted by Major Thomas Weir. He was a male witch. He was burned alive for witchcraft, adultery, bestiality and incest in 1670. He lived up there and he haunts that street. On the right-hand side here is the outer wall of Greyfriars Kirkyard. So the most haunted graveyard in the world is on the right-hand side behind this wall. And on the TV screens, you'll see what it looks like inside the graveyard. And they reckon there's at least 300,000 bodies buried inside Greyfriars. I'll tell you about the most famous haunting in just a second. But on the left-hand side, Greyfriars Bobby, the statue of the Skye Terrier dog there on the left. That wee dog sat on top of his dead master's grave every single day for 14 years. If anyone's planning to visit the graveyard, stay away from this tomb on your television screens now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the final resting place of a very evil judge. This man was called Bloody George Mackenzie. He was responsible for the death and suffering of hundreds of people in Old Edinburgh and he's buried in that tomb. In the late 1990s, a homeless man broke into the tomb, fell through the floor, and landed on top of the rotting remains of bloody Mackenzie. In 2003, a teenage boy called Sonny Devlin broke into the tomb. He cut the judge's head off with a penknife and used it as a football around the graveyard. He later became a traffic warden. After these things happened to the Mackenzie tomb, people started to get attacked around the graveyard. They'd be cut, scratched, knocked unconscious. And they call this thing the Mackenzie poltergeist. It's the most violent poltergeist in the world, the most documented poltergeist in history, and it is still active, attacking people to this very day. And several years ago, a local man called the Reverend Colin Grant performed an exorcism inside the graveyard. And after he finished, he left the place shaking, saying, "This place will kill me." 2 weeks later, he dropped dead. There's the gates of the graveyard on the left-hand side. I'm going to tell you the story of the three McKinnon sisters. These were three singers and dancers in the 1700s. And the McKinnon sisters were caught performing without a licence. What do you think the punishment was for that? Death. Sentenced to death for singing and dancing. And Justin Bieber, you can understand. So they took the three McKinnon sisters into a pub on this street, and they sealed them into a room, and they left them there to die. That was the punishment. The pub still exists, and it's coming up on the right-hand side along here with all the fairy lights. It's now named after the three sisters. Here it is. So the McKinnon sisters died in there in 1753 for performing without a licence. Now, you've probably heard of the Edinburgh vaults, the haunted vaults or the vaults of South Bridge. The bridge is coming up just ahead of us here. We're about to travel underneath the only exposed archway of South Bridge. So here we go. Either side of us, inside these walls here, are 120 vaults. And there's a ghost of a lady in black who targets pregnant women, making them feel sick, pushing them over. There's a ghost of Mr. Boots. Now, he was a slum landlord from the turn of the 18th century who murdered a lady, hid her body inside the vaults, and if you ever visit the vaults, don't take a torch. Mr. Boots attacks anyone who tries to shine a light in the vault where he hid that body. Originally designed to be storage vaults for the local shops, they were damp, so the shopkeepers moved out, and all the criminal underclass and the poor people moved in. Anyway, let's move into Holyrood Road. And I just wonder what ghost story I should tell you here. Let me think. There's so many stories.
Tell them the real ghost story. The one about this bus.
No, Angus, I'm not supposed to tell that story.
Tell them about the fire. Tell them about the granny.
Angus, I'm not supposed to mention the granny.
Tell them about the granny. But I will.
Ladies and gentlemen, back in the 1970s, a weird old granny died in a fire on this very bus. They say the granny's ghost haunts this place. And if anyone sits in the granny's seat, well, something terrible will happen. Ladies and gentlemen, please remain calm. Some kind of electrical malfunction. Although it's strange that should happen when I mentioned the granny. I'll just quickly check the cameras and make sure everything's okay. That's downstairs. There's a moose loose about this house. I told you there was rats in that graveyard. Maybe it's playing hide and squeak. I hope no one's frightened. I'm not scared. I've got the heart of a lion. Seeing that rat reminds me of the plague. The bubonic plague came to Edinburgh in 1645 and it killed half the population of this city. 20,000 people were killed by plague. Now, you develop these big boils on your body. They would burst and poison your bloodstream. But the treatment for it wasn't much better. They would lance the boils and clean the wounds out with vinegar. They would then cauterize the wound with a red hot poker. And remember, no anaesthetic back then. And the plague doctors were really terrifying. They would wear these big masks with beaks on them. and the beaks were filled with strong-smelling spices because they thought the plague was spread by bad smells. So everyone was trying to smoke the plague out of their houses by burning heather. They'd no idea the plague was spread by fleas living on the back of rats. And Edinburgh was described as a living carpet of rats. We also had no toilets. You had to do your business into a bucket, throw the contents out the window, shouting, "Gardyloo!" And the poor people down below would run and duck for cover, shouting, "Oh, sugar, what a horrible mess." Imagine having no toilet. When I was a boy, we did our business in the neighbour's garden. We had a toilet, we just didn't like the neighbours. So Edinburgh was a very filthy, horrible, smelly place, and we tried to clean things up. In 1749, they introduced the Nastiness Act. This was a law that said you could not throw your excrement out the window until 10 o'clock at night. But as soon as the clock struck 10, you were legally allowed to throw your filth willy-nilly as long as you shouted "Gardyloo." And that act has never been repealed. So give it, 15 minutes or so, get your buckets ready and give them a good throw. As long as you shout "Gardyloo," police can't touch you. But Gardyloo, that's French, isn't it? It's medieval French. It means watch out for the water. So why were we speaking French in Edinburgh? Well, we had a lot of trading with France, so some of the words got into our language here, and we still call the toilet the loo even today. But we're moving on now into Holyrood Park. Now, in July of 1836, 5 local boys found a wee cave hidden in this park, just hidden in the hillside somewhere. And inside the wee cave, they found a pile of 17 tiny coffins with dolls inside them. Now, I'll show you these coffins on the TV screens here. These are the ones that still survive, but they found 17 of them. Nobody knows who left them or why. Some people think it was witchcraft, like voodoo dolls. But the best theory is they were tributes to the victims of Burke and Hare. Now, Burke and Hare killed 16 people, but they actually sold 17 bodies. The first body they sold was a natural death. So they sold 17 bodies and somebody left 17 coffins in this park. But it is a mystery. On the right-hand side, the gardens of Holyrood Palace. And they reckon there's about 8,000 plague victims buried under those gardens on the right-hand side. Holyrood Palace is haunted by the ghost of an old woman called Bald Agnes. Agnes Sampson was accused of being a witch, and she was tortured inside the palace in 1591. Her naked ghost is seen at the windows. Have a look if you're into naked old ladies. Who's looking? Sometimes I look myself, I'm very lonely. So the palace on the right-hand side. I told you this bus was haunted. It's the granny. See, a couple of years ago, we had a psychic on the bus. And this psychic saw the ghost of the granny sitting in one of the seats. And she tapped the ghost on the shoulder. And it looked her in the eyes and it said, "Get out of my seat." Now, I don't want to spook anyone, but I think someone must be sitting in the granny's seat right now. Now, it could be somebody downstairs, it could be somebody upstairs. If anyone starts to feel weird or strange, you could be sitting in the granny's seat. And something terrible could happen. How about you? How are you feeling?
All right, I guess.
All right so far. Well, I'll give you a tip. Don't trust psychics. I went out with a psychic once. She kept seeing people behind my back. Anyway, I should be telling you about that granny. That's a banned story. That was Angus that brought it up. I'm supposed to tell you the ghost stories outside the bus. Now we're going to head off here on the left-hand side, ladies and gentlemen. You'll see the Scottish Parliament building. Quite a modern building. It was built in 2004, the Scottish Parliament. So it's not haunted yet. But there is a famous haunted house behind the Parliament called Queensberry House. And I'll show you the house round the corner. But let's have a preview of it on the TV screens here. This is Queensberry House. Now, in 1707, a madman killed, roasted, and ate a young kitchen boy inside that house. The cannibal killer was the mad son of the Duke of Queensberry. He was violently insane, so the family kept him locked away. But he escaped one day went down to the kitchen and murdered and ate this young boy. His ghost haunts the house, and the house is coming up on the left here behind the gate. So let's have a look for Queensbury House, left-hand side down. And people have been pinned up against the walls inside the house by a violent unseen force. And the kitchen where the murder took place is now a private bar for the MP. This is the Royal Mile we're on now. Now keep your eyes out here for the ghost of a lady in a tartan dress. In the 1700s, she was murdered, stabbed to death in a house on this street, and they never caught the killer. But the woman's ghost is seen, tartan dress and a white apron. I'll tell you the house she was stabbed in. Here, so one of these houses here she was stabbed in. Her ghost is seen in this area here. Tartan dress lady. Eyes out. Angus. Ladies and gentlemen, we seem to have lost the pictures on the TV screens. I do apologise. I'm sure it's nothing paranormal, although it seems to get worse every time we mention the granny. I'm going to try and fix the TVs. Give me a shout if I get a picture, please. Oh, hang on.
Who's that woman?
Angus, who the hell was that?
You're not supposed to let people on during the tour.
Nobody else got on this bus.
You've picked up another passenger.
What are you trying to tell us, Angus?
It's her. Granny's here.
Ladies and gentlemen, this is an emergency situation. We're going to have to stop the bus, and I'm going to have to ask you to close the curtains all around where you're sitting. Close the curtains upstairs, close the curtains downstairs. If you're too nervous to close the curtains, for God's sake, pull yourself together. I shall explain everything in just a moment. Okay, everyone, there is something with us on board this bus tonight. Now listen, I've told you bits and pieces about this granny that haunts the place, but there's one final thing you have to know. The granny that died here in the fire died on the 18th of March, 1974, 50 years ago. This very night, she's come back for her revenge. She's not going to let you leave. There's only one way out. We are going to have to get rid of this granny. So, ladies and gentlemen, we are going to combine our energy and perform a seance. This could be dangerous. If we get this wrong, somebody could be possessed. So follow my instructions carefully. We have to create an energy field. And we're going to do this evening using the power of group concentration. So after the count of 3, everyone has to concentrate really hard. Let's get rid of this granny. 1, 2, 3, concentrate. Spirit, come through. Give us a sign. Throw something, bang something, make a noise. Oh, I don't like this. Spirit, if you mean us harm, then bang again. I think we're safe. Oh, shit. Spirit, who are you? Are you the ghost of the granny that died in the fire? Be gone, spirit! Cross over to the other side! Head into the lights! Leave us in! It's not working. She's not going to leave. Is everyone okay downstairs? Upstairs? I don't feel very well. I feel as if something's taken over. I better go and phone for help. Remain in your seats and don't panic.
Get out of my face!
Is everyone all right? Oh my goodness, let's open up the nearest curtain and see where we are. I think we did it. I think we made contact with the other side. Although did we manage to get rid of the ghost of the evil granny? Sometimes these spirits can jump into the bodies of people nearby. Have a look at the person next to you in the eyes. Be very careful who you go home with tonight. You don't want the granny coming back to haunt your house. Well, ladies and gentlemen, you've gotten rid of the granny. You've learnt a wee bit about Edinburgh's dark history, and you have survived the Ghost Bus Tour. Let's have a round of applause for Uncle Angus! And thank you so much to all of you for joining us on the tour this evening. It's been great fun having you. If you've enjoyed the tour this evening with myself, Tommy Terror, give us a nice mention on TripAdvisor. One final thing I want to say though is, we've had a wee bit of fun tonight with the story of the granny. But let me assure you, all the other Edinburgh ghost stories in history I've told you are absolutely true. Don't have nightmares. This is a very spooky city. Any final thoughts from you, Angus?
Thanks for coming to get the hell off my bus.
Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for travelling with Ghost Bus Tours. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Necróbulos Transporte. Está tudo cheio de fumo agora. Vocês tiveram a experiência completa comigo. Espero mesmo que tenham gostado. Este tudo contém sons altos, luzes, fumo elétrico e más piadas. Entra a teu próprio risco. E lá vai o autocarro dos sustos. Adorei esta experiência aqui em Edimburgo. Faz todo o sentido. Esta cidade é mesmo assustadora. E o autocarro também foi muito fixe, muito engraçado e assustador ao mesmo tempo. Sinceramente, eu disse ao condutor e é verdade, isto realmente assustou-me em algumas alturas. Eu levei uns valentes sustos, não vou mentir. Vocês realmente também espero que tenham gostado da experiência. Se gostaram do vlog, rebentem com o botão do like, comentem aqui em baixo o que acharam do vídeo e subscrevam o canal aqui em baixo para não perderem os próximos.
Não percas o próximo vlog, onde vou visitar duas das galerias de arte mais famosas de Edimburgo e ainda um sítio que parece saído de um conto de fadas. Ou vê o vlog anterior, onde vou para a Escócia e tive o meu primeiro contacto com a cidade de Edimburgo.